watching on whatever platform. If you feel free to say something if it's all coming through okay. You're my producer, you, the general public. We're broadcasting on the Facebook page of Popular Resistance, as well as on YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, and elsewhere. You can find all my live streamed discussions in podcast form afterwards if you subscribe to or look up This Week with David Rovics on any podcasting platform or go to davidrovics.com. Today's guest is a fellow performer, among many other things. I usually start these conversations by asking people in which ways their lives have fallen apart since the pandemic hit. With Mike, I know where he was supposed to be right now, if not for the virus. He and I would be sitting in a car together driving across Sweden right now, having just played a gig in Stockholm last night on our way to a gig at a folk school in Western Denmark that was scheduled for tomorrow. Instead, I'm home in Portland, Oregon, and Mike is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, one of the hardest hit cities in the U.S. right now. The circumstances that Mike Africa Jr. was born into made it pretty unlikely that he was going to grow up to be, say, a prosecutor, or unlikely that he would grow up at all. Many others of Mike's generation who were born on the move did not survive. They were killed when the mayor of Philadelphia sent a helicopter to bomb Mike's relatives, and then they were shot by police as they tried to leave the building. Mike Africa Jr. was born in a prison cell where his parents, Mike and Debbie Africa, spent the next 40 years. Who knew that they would be getting out of prison just before a pandemic swept through the prisons, jails, and other detention centers across the country? Since they got out of prison, Mike has been, until recently, doing a lot of traveling, performing, and writing, among other things. Mike Africa Jr., welcome to my little live stream show.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much for that beautiful introduction.
Mike, you have a Zoom meeting coming up with a Philadelphia city councilor scheduled after our talk is over, and I'm just wondering if you could tell people what that's about.
So the city of Philadelphia has this May 13th, 2020 marks the makes 35 years since the bombing of our family on Osage Avenue, and the city of Philadelphia has been prompted to make an official apology for what they did, not only to the MOVE organization, but also for the loss of property from the neighbors and the community, and also to the members of the police department who were unaware, some of them unaware of what was going to happen on May 13th. They were not part of the plan. They did not know that a bomb was going to be dropped. And so they have been prompted to, the city had been prompted to make an official apology to those people. We've been, very active in trying to get the council members to adopt this apology and to push it. And today I have a phone call with some or one of them to push that through.
Mm-hmm. And is Mumia Abu Jamal currently the last member of MOVE that's in prison, or are there other MOVE people still in prison?
So Mumia is not necessarily, he's not an actual MOVE member, but he's definitely a member of our family. And he is the last.
I mean, he does sign off many of his communications saying "Long live John Africa." So I guess I just assumed.
Well then, yes. Let's say then in one word, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he's the last of the MOVE group to be in prison, and that's our demand, and our, if the city is apologetic, and then okay, free Mumia.
Yeah, right. And any idea what the situation is as far as the virus in prison there? Because I know your parents just got out of prison only less than 2 years ago, and
Right.
which now seems like kind of remarkable timing, given that there's this massive virus going through the prison system, especially right now.
Especially in Pennsylvania too. Some of the prison guards have come down in the contracting the virus. Some of the prisoners actually have died since the virus hit. And the prison right now is on 23-hour a day lockdown. People are allowed to go and take a shower for an hour a day. They have, a chance to go to a library and get a book or something for 1 hour, and then they're like kind of shuffled back into their cells. I think they're being allowed out 12 people at a time. It's very restrictive, um, much more restrictive than prison usually is.
And it's often, I mean, 23 hours in a cell is commonly the situation for a lot of people in prisons in the United States, right? Being let out for
Yeah.
an hour and that sort of thing.
And isolation and the whole and restricted housing units, yeah, 23 hours of lockdown is common. Some of these people spend more than 23 hours a day in a prison cell, and oftentimes they don't get to go outside and see the sun or be, able to breathe fresh air. So it's a pretty intense situation right now. People
Yeah.
like Russell Maroon Schultz spent decades in solitary confinement. People like Carlos Africa, Chuck Africa, they spent 6 years in a solitary confinement where they were not allowed to go outside of their cell. So this is a restriction. It's inhumane. It's not a way to treat anybody. So it's a tragic situation. I think that people that are experiencing this pandemic and are restricted from being able to see their mothers and their fathers. And I have a friend who's a doctor, and she talked to me about how, because she's a doctor, when she comes home, she's afraid to touch her kids. Her kids, she didn't give them a hug for weeks. And she talked about how hard that was to see them and not be able to hug them. And I think that's something that people can use to understand prison life a little bit. It's just really about the restriction. You're not allowed to see your family. You're not allowed to eat what you want. You're not allowed to get fresh air. You're not allowed to, um, interact with your family. That's a terrible thing. So for the people that are experiencing this pandemic and wish they could go to a show and see a club or get their hair cut or whatever, just recognize that there are some people that are in prison and they haven't been able to do that for 40 years.
It's like it's such a moment where so many people are suffering in so many different ways, but that takes on so many different forms, from major to minor. I mean, you got, I think, on NPR today they said, according to a recent poll, 44% of people in the United States are worried about whether they can feed themselves, in the immediate future. That's a
Mm.
massive number, and it's really a kind of a new situation. I mean, but then at the same time, for so many people, it's not new at all. I mean, you have described growing up in the neighborhood that you grew up in, and then the food insecurity and the housing insecurity that was around you growing up in Philadelphia and around so many other people all over this country. But that is that's one thing I keep thinking of, this prison. I mean, whereas most people haven't experienced going to prison necessarily or being in solitary confinement, this quarantine, that people are going through is just a little bit of a taste of that, of isolation, and it's driving a lot of people crazy. There's a lot of people really suffering mental serious problems from this kind of isolation, and they're not in prison. They're only
And
imprisoned
they're
in
not
their
in prison.
homes. Yeah.
Right. And they can go out, they can walk around, they can take walks to they can't, I don't think they can like hang out at parks, but they can definitely take walks around their neighborhood. They can see their family member by Skype and by Zoom, and they can call them whenever they want, and they're not restricted in that way. But the fact that they are restricted from being able to, unlimitedly just do whatever they used to do, that is really having a major impact. They should really use that as a way to feel some kind of compassion for the people that are in prison, because these, like I said, some of these people, like Mumia, who is innocent. There's a lot of other people like Mumia who is in prison, been in prison for decades. Um, you know, as a way to feel some compassion for those people, they can look at the situation that they're in now and use it as a way to get a glimpse of what those people experience every day.
Yeah, and then also many people who might have had no problems paying their mortgages or paying their rent up until a couple of months ago, suddenly there are a lot more people having problems coming up with that, and this rent strike seems to be spreading all over. What's been going on around your neighborhood? Are you seeing what are you getting much of an impression of what's going on in terms of like anybody organizing around housing or the general strike or people walking off the job, that sort of thing?
Well, over here, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of that. People are protesting because they want to go back to work,
Oh wow.
but it's more people are protesting because they want to get a haircut.
Hmm.
They want to protest because they want to get they want to go to the salon and get their nails done and all that kind of stuff. That's but mostly people are just kind of like living with the situation. That's what I've seen mostly.
Yeah.
A lot of workers are that are considered essential workers. They are still going to work and they're happy about it. And a lot of people that are unemployed, from where I can see, they're getting paid more than they were before they were unemployed. I mean,
Yeah.
the
So
stimulus check that gives them $600 a week plus the 60% of their check that they're getting from unemployment, they're making more money than they were.
and you know people who
And
are actually getting their checks, do you? Because I mean I applied and I'm
I
not
do,
getting it
yeah,
yet. But yeah, that's good. Uh,
yeah, I do. And like, see, for me, I mean, back home in Philly, we were growing up, we were so broke, we had to save up to be poor. So like this situation for us is just kind of like normal. But for the people, the middle class especially, who are used to things being a certain way, I know a lot of middle class people that have never stood in the unemployment line and they don't know what it's like to do that walk of shame.
yeah.
They have no concept. So I think a lot of the pride part of things is probably hitting people a little hard too, that they have to apply for unemployment. It is kind of crazy that as a landscaper, my profession is considered to be essential, but there's a dentist that I work for, and his job is not considered essential, so he's at home applying for unemployment. It's kind of weird. They sent out $1,200 stimulus checks to people that applied for taxes last year or whatever. I don't know what that's all about. It looks like Donald Trump is trying to buy his way into an office seat again. I mean, it looks like a payout, a bribe to me.
Did you get your letter
There's
signed
all
by
kind of.
Donald Trump?
I did, and I kept it, and I put it in my little folder so that I can store it away, so that I can have it for historic sake. If I ever run into him, I'll remind him of the nice things he said to me. It was quite shocking. Um, I definitely will. I doubt that he ever saw those letters, right? Like who writes this letter and just you know did he sign it really? Come on now.
He insisted
He
apparently that he was going to be the one to sign it. It was not supposed to be originally like his personal gift, but apparently that was his insistence.
Now was
Yeah.
that before or after he told Americans to inject themselves with bleach?
That was before. That was before, and then he decided, okay, fuck them all, just inject the bleach until let's get done with it. Yeah.
Right. We could just, and then he had his advisor on the side saying, "Yeah, we can see what that will look like." Like, really? Oh man, it's a tragedy that we live in a world where we make up much less than 27% of the population, but we have 27% of the coronavirus population.
Yeah, really, what
You
does that
know,
say about our country, about this country? I mean, it really is exposing serious divisions in this country, obviously.
yeah. The beach is packed. The neighborhoods are people are barbecuing. People are not taking it serious. They think that it's a joke, and it very well could be some kind of hoax going on within this whole thing. I don't know, but what I do know is that the leadership of this country is really in trouble. We're being led we're being led not to justice or equality or freedom or anything like that. We're being led to deeper debt and harsher sentences. And when people go on the beaches and celebrate, they get handed out masks by police officers. But when the brothers in the neighborhoods, go outside to mingle with their friends, they're being pepper sprayed and put in chokeholds by police. So this whole thing is just it's like a nightmare that some people are really just trying to wake up from.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like, I mean, whatever is all behind it in terms of where the virus came from or whatever, but it doesn't seem like I mean, it's hard for I don't have enough of an imagination to try to imagine why any leaders of any country would want to shut down their economies unless they had some kind of reason to do it that made some kind of sense. Because I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just, again, not imaginative enough, but what they're exposing themselves to in terms of like the instability and the suffering that they're, imposing on the society, and that they're maybe trying to, alleviate a little with these checks and the unemployment and stuff. But, people are really suffering. And I wonder what's going to, and, what's going to come out of this. I mean, obviously nobody knows, but it's just, we're all thinking about it, aren't we? Like, where is this going? Like, are people going to
Right.
rebel against this, or are people just going to take it? Is capitalism going to just save itself by sending us enough money? Yeah, who knows? But
I
it's
think I think what comes out what it brings me to is a deeper look at the virus effects, causes. I think it brings me to be healthy. It brings me to relying on nature as my life force, because it is, and trusting that which is natural, because the people that are surviving this coronavirus are the people that have certain things in place in their internal systems that they like rely on, right? I think that like they talked about people that, what is it, in Israel and Saudi Arabia, that have the least amount of cases. And one of the things that they said was lemons and oregano really helps with surviving and all of that kind of stuff.
I think the
It
Mediterranean
sounds like
diet, yeah. I mean, the Mediterranean diet has long been shown to be very healthy. Olive oil, vegetables, and this sort of thing.
right.
Yeah.
So that's what it seems like it comes down to. Is like we have to ditch this whole system of convenience, and more so look at the system of nature, and that is the solution. When you get a cold, the healthier you are when you're eating your onions or whatever, the easier you're going to bounce back from it, the more likely that it is that you won't even get sick. So like, health is natural and the system is unnatural. So how can it be healthy? And as long as we go into the system, then how are we going to, you know, how can we expect to be healthy? At the Seed of Wisdom, which is our nonprofit that we started to encourage people to be healthy, we started this thing where we're giving away bikes to kids, and we're giving them away because it's a great way for them to stay active and stay healthy, and at the same time they can practice social distancing, because that's the thing that needs to be done at this point. um, and the health that people can gain, and the lesson that people can learn from this whole thing is that health is so very important, and you can't get health from the system. Health is natural. John Africa taught move. Health is natural, and the system is unnatural. So how can it be healthy?
And you do organic landscaping. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, and it's
I do.
yeah.
I do.
Have you
That's right. No,
been doing a lot of writing lately? Has the virus or anything else in relation to the pandemic inspired any creative output? Yeah.
yeah. So my uncle Chuck, he did 41 and a half years in prison. He came home, and him and I are working on a song
Oh,
right
great.
now. It's called "It Don't Matter." It don't matter. And It touches on this kind of thing. Like, it don't matter if you're black or white. It don't matter if you're human or a tiger in the zoo. It don't matter what your class is. It don't matter. The only thing that matters is that you survive. Because this pandemic doesn't have a discrimination for race or color or creed, religion. It don't matter. And that's a song we're working on right now.
Are you doing much with the live streaming craze that's been sweeping the world?
Right, right. So I did a show with for Mumia for his birthday. It was
Mm.
it was called hashtag Mumia 66, and I did a live show on a was a Zoom call or something. So yeah, that's it's picking up in that virtual category for me.
And so, like, are you doing a regular scheduled broadcast or anything, or are you just when things come up, or it's just happening more often, kind of organically? Like,
Yeah, it's happening more organically when things come up. I'd like to do something regularly scheduled, but I haven't committed to doing that so far.
and when before we were going to be meeting up in Europe and touring, which we were supposed to be doing right now, you were doing quite a lot of traveling, and you were going to the West Coast. It seems like back and forth between the East Coast and the West Coast for several months, and that you had a lot of other gigs that have been canceled since the past couple months.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. They would. Those gigs were. I think I had something like 17 events planned um, throughout the month of from. I think it was sometime in March through September,
And
and
were you
that's not
mostly
including the European trip we were doing.
right? Yeah. So yeah, it could have been more like 27
Quite a
events
quite a
planned in the
Yeah,
end.
yeah.
And yeah, and were they mostly like were you mostly doing this speaking or hip hop or both?
So my one man show that I do called Born on the Move. It's a collaboration of me doing some hip hop lyrics, and I do a couple songs just to kind of jumpstart the audience, and then it carries over into me telling the story of my birth in prison to my all the way throughout confrontations, and then into me and working to get my parents out of prison.
And it's a fantastic spellbinding presentation, and your writing is also totally immersive and wonderful. And I don't know when that memoir might come out, but I wonder just what's the secret to telling such a good story, to engaging people like that. I mean, I'm sure the content that you have to talk about is helps a lot. That it's absolutely crazy and fascinating stuff that you're talking about. But what would you say? What's other than good content? What's the secret to telling a good story?
The secret is don't forget the details. When I talk about the bomb that was dropped on my family's home on May 13th, 1985, that's people can't even fathom that. So it's usually too much for people to really wrap their minds around. But describing that, I could see the smoke in the air, and I could smell the fire, the smoke for days after, and 2 days after the fire was put out, the sky rained ash. Those details that people would never even think of, to ask or to think about. It's just, it kind of shows a little bit more of the magnitude of how long they allowed this fire to burn, and that, there were children in that house, and talk about the details of that and how they were shot and thrown back into the fire. And when they were taken, when their bodies were taken to the burial site after weeks of decomposing on a lab table,
Mm.
Their bodies were put into a coffin and wrapped in an American flag and then
Oh,
put into the ground. So, like, the details. Don't forget the details.
yeah, those details. That's really what it's those particular sights and smells and things that aren't in the sort of little brief newspaper account that really bring things alive for people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Gosh, but
It
how
makes it makes people it makes people able to really like feel it a little deeper.
do you think that there's do you think that music and hip hop is a particularly effective way to bring people to a realization or an understanding or bring people to a place that they've never been if they weren't
I
in
think
that house.
yeah. I think that for the audience that listens to hip hop, yeah, then that's a good medium. But there's rock and folk and any genre of music.
It's about
Also
music, huh?
television. Yeah,
Television.
any genre of music. Television too. A children's school, a children's book about the situation. Anything, any way, meet people where they are. You got
Mhm.
to meet people where they are, and give it to them how they're accustomed to getting it. It doesn't really matter how they get it, as long as they get it. Some people get it in the morning paper. Some people get it on an album from David Rovix.
There
Some
was
people get it.
there was some something I read on in some news report a few years ago that there was a study that found that words when sung go directly to the emotional centers of the brain and they communicate with people differently. You can really hear and process information differently when you're hearing it in a song than if you hear somebody speaking. And I thought that was very
Mhm.
interesting. Yeah.
I think that's very true. I think that music is a universal language.
You
You don't even have to know the words. You don't even have to sing words. Just you can. It's the touching, the music, the instruments, the singing, all of. I mean, that touches you in a way where
You're breaking up. We're losing you there.
you can't really penetrate that part of it, that part of you.
We lost you for a few seconds there. Are you
Can
in
you hear
the?
me?
Yeah, for a few seconds you were gone. Are you in the same spot or just?
I haven't moved for
Oh,
28
okay,
minutes.
it's just a popular time to uh, talk on the. Everybody else is broadcasting now at the same time. The towers are full, but yeah. Do you have any particular
Um,
plans for when the borders open up and travel is possible again? Any or it's too and people in some
yeah,
countries people are actually planning for the future now. Isn't that a weird thing to think about? Like I don't know if anybody that's doing that in the US, but I know people in some European countries who are talking about when they're going to do start planning a tour and stuff. I can't imagine it actually. But
right. Well, I've already gotten a few calls from different places that want me to speak or perform at the universities. So I sent them a letter saying, yeah, I surely would love to do this, but we definitely have to play it by ear. And they sent me a letter back saying, of course, we'll play it by ear, but we'd love for you to do this. So I've already started. They've already started, trying to book me for the month of September. So we'll see.
that's good.
But my plan though is I run a nonprofit called the Seed of Wisdom, and at the Seed of Wisdom we're all about nurturing the good in people, and so we put together this thing called the Summer Games, which is an annual health and fitness event, and it's a family friendly event, and people can sign up to be a part of it, and you can do it from anywhere in the country, and we're trying to get that off the ground, and so that's our next project. Hopefully we can have our celebration at the end of the Summer Games like we normally do, and we can get together and have active fun-filled day in the park, where we have all of our participants come and run through obstacle courses and play soccer, and then enjoy a feast at the end of it. And the grand prize is a couple of bicycles that we give away to our participants.
Oh, that's great. And it's mostly it's kids. This is all for kids.
It's a it's all for kids, but it's a family event. So like how basically how it works is like this. So we're competing. My kid, I think the ages start from at the age of 7. I think the ages is like from 7 to 18. Different people, you pick your team like a schoolyard pick, and you compete your exercise is your competition. So if I do 10 push-ups, I get 10 points. If you do 10 sit-ups, you get 10 points. And whoever can do the most, whoever does the most, wins the challenge. Also, if my father does, if I do, if I can get my father to do push-ups for him, his points goes to me.
Ah.
And so so the kids, now obviously I'm not a kids, but the kids, they push their parents to exercise because they want to get their points. So their mom, I need you to do this exercise. You get, and so it's helpful because no one can push their kids. No one can push parents like their own kids. So at the end of it, the winner gets the prizes or whatever.
Hmm.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a
great.
friendly competition.
Yeah, Mike, it's switching gears. Just you're when you're talking about how people try to relate to your childhood and what you're talking about when you're talking about like the bombing of the move house and all this kind of thing. That like how I just I'm asking. I don't have the answers by any means, but I just one of the things that strikes me so much about you particularly is this sort of openness and warmth about you, and I just don't like how how do you try to grapple with I mean, the message that I hear you and Chuck and other people talking about this is a very inclusive message about humanity and what we need to accomplish as a species to move forward. And but what you've experienced in your life, I mean, the inhumanity uh, of people that can shoot at somebody who is trying to leave a burning building, to take a stark example. I just
Hmm.
how how does that work? How do you still how do you still have hope for humanity, which seems like you do have? How do you
Well,
move
I
on
mean,
from that?
you can't really, you can't, you can't cure hate with hate. You know, you can't, the hate. We have enough hate in this world. We have more than we need. We have more than we'll ever need. And pain is not something that people have to go through. People go through it because of actions, malconduct from others and all of that. But that's something that's avoidable. And John Africa taught move people. He said people are like clay. People are like soft clay. When they're young, they're impressionable. You can mold them and shape them any type of way that you want. But as they get older, they harden and they stiffen up, and then it becomes harder to change them. And if you try to change them too fast, they break.
Hmm.
Well, like we're all about trying to put out the good vibrations and show people the truth in nature and the love in nature, and trying to incorporate that into the minds of young people so that as they're growing, they're being molded and shaped in those formative years. They're being shaped into something that's good and wholesome. And because we understand that the children are the future, we have to maintain that position. And we do get angry, don't make no mistake about it. We have our anger and our issues with that and how to deal with it. But we try to like overcome all that by just understanding the truth that you know that nature is important, the children are important, and the only way that we're going to get to where we're trying to get to is to nurture the goodness in people and not try to focus on the bad and live there with that. You got to nurture the good in people.
Mm. Speaking of children, you have met other people who were born in prison, haven't you?
I have. I've
Can
met.
you
I've
tell
met.
me
I've
about
met.
that? What
I've
was
met.
that like?
It's surreal. It's like, I mean, when people when I tell people that I was born in prison, the reaction that I get from people is I get mixed reactions. But one of the people are usually shocked, like, what? Like, how is that possible? And even though it's me, it's always surprising to me when I meet people that are born in prison because I have the same reaction that people have when they meet me. It's like, what? Because it's me, I don't think about it all the time, right? I know it, but I don't think about it. So when I hear it from other people, it's like, what? What do you mean? Like, I don't understand that. But there's another member of the organization that was born in prison too. Her name, she's Eddie's daughter, Eddie Africa. He just came home from prison after 41 years. His daughter was born in prison too. She was born just 3 weeks before I was, but she
That's
doesn't.
wild.
She doesn't talk on radio shows and all that kind of stuff, so you wouldn't know that.
Hmm.
Yeah, her and I we bonded over that, similarity.
It is. There is a bonding. There is a feeling of commonality. I mean, what? How would you describe? I mean, because these things happened way before you could remember anything. But there's still a feeling of like you went through this experience together of being
Yeah, because
separated
you're
from
not
your
alone.
mothers. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you're not alone. You can identify. I mean, she knows how it feels to be separated from her mom. She knows
yeah.
how it feels to be born in a place and then being taken from her mom and given to someone else to be raised and all that. So yeah, I mean, we can relate to each other in a way where no one else can.
And was she also raised largely by her grandparents?
Well, so her mom didn't stay in her dad stayed in prison until he just got out, like my mom and dad. But her mom actually got out um before she got out long before 40 years. She got out just about a year after she was arrested.
You
So
know
she was
what?
raised by her mom. Yeah.
Right. One of those details that when you mention it, it's the little details that kind of like bring a picture kind of alive for people rather than the sort of big picture, which can be kind of too much to take in. But when you mentioned when you mentioned last October, you were talking about how while your parents were in prison all that time, they were in prison in a rural part of Pennsylvania where they didn't even have a radio station where they could hear hip hop, right? So or many other
Right.
modern forms of music. So basically, like you were saying that they were just not exposed to anything that was happening as far as this kind of whole massive musical development. So then by the time they heard the music you were doing, they're like, what the heck is this stuff? It sounds really kind of weird, huh? What was that must
Yeah,
have been quite something.
they were listening to Eddie Rabbit and Hank Williams, and they didn't really get to listen to. I mean, they what they had to do is they had to order music through the mail through the room by artists that they liked, and as they did that, they would learn about other music. But my dad was not a fan of rap music at all.
And how
Yeah.
about your grandparents?
My grandmother was a fan of certain rap songs, but she was not a fan of rap music, really. In fact, she didn't like it. I mean, she didn't like it. She couldn't stand it. It was too. She didn't like it. It was too arrogant, and especially back in the early days where there was, the rappers that were hardcore, in your face. Like she didn't, she wasn't a fan. She grew up, she listened to the Temptations and Smokey Robinson and the Miracles and Sam Cooke and Otis Redding. That's what I grew up on, being raised by her. But of course, because rap was such a new and a phenomenon, like I listened to that just as much or more.
Any any developments? I don't know if we can you've been sort of uh, doing a bit of interviewing people yourself in different kind of contexts. Is that that kind of any plans for more of that going on in the future?
Definitely. I think right now, because of the pandemic, it's hard to really do any of that. But I definitely am working on trying to do more interviews and take a more journalistic approach so that I can, ask some of the questions that um, I think people might be able to, hearing it from a revolutionary, yourself, like it might have a different feel to it than the normal biased reporter who's asking asking questions.
Yeah. Mike, have you ever met somebody else whose home was bombed by the police or by
No, I have.
perhaps the military?
I've um, I've never met anyone that were where their home was bombed, but I did meet people that was bombed. Back in the '90s, I met Judy Barry, and I met Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, I think it was, where they came in and bombed that community. I did meet one of the surviving members of that tragedy um,
Hmm.
back in 1997.
They must have
And
been
yeah,
really old.
oh yeah, um, yeah. She was a Mumia supporter.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that's when you get a chance to travel more internationally. I wonder if that's it's one of the things I was looking forward to about going to Europe with you is the possibility of you meeting more people from other countries who may have had actually very similar experiences with their governments. But you don't need to leave the U.S. to find similar experiences either, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, I imagine that in other places where war is happening a lot, people, there's a lot more people that I would come across that I would meet. I'm sure. Um, it's a tragic situation, but we just have to keep on grinding.
Keep on grinding. Yeah. Take
Yeah,
it one
yeah,
day at a time. Grow some organic vegetables. Do you have a big garden?
definitely. Grow some. I have a garden. I have kale. I have onions. I have Swiss chard. What did I plant? We were waiting for some. We're going to do some tomatoes. I have three grapevines. Um, yeah, I got a good amount of stuff. We eat for 3 seasons. We don't buy produce.
That's great. When I try to like in a sentence explain to people who have never heard of move like what move is about, I often come down to like well it's sort of there's armed self defense and organic vegetables are both essential elements. Is that I mean, how would you describe what is move about? Who was John Africa?
In a sentence, I would say, um, in a sentence, it's hard to say it in a sentence. Um, um, an organization that believed in nature and was bombed for it.
Interesting. And what the belief in nature? I mean, like, where is that? Where is that coming from originally? What was why that focus in the middle of a very urban part of the world in West Philadelphia. Is that the origins of the organization are in one of the densely populated cities in the U.S. Right, so it's just
Yeah,
like an interesting place for sort of back to the landers to come from in a way, you know.
right, right. Well, John Africa was in the military. He was drafted to the Korean War in 1954, I believe.
Mm,
And when he was drafted, he was in Korea, and he saw combat, and he could see the destruction of the mountains. He could see the destruction of the people. He could see the destruction of the water, the river that he drank from one day. He couldn't drink from the next day because of the bombs and the bodies and the this and that. So he saw that destruction. He saw animals being wounded and killed and maimed, and so he wanted to do something about it. So when he got home, he immediately started working on um, talking about life and the importance for freedom. And he understood that it was coming from the government. The war was coming from the government, and they were bombing and hurting for money and all of that. So being that he was from Philadelphia, he started talking to the people in Philadelphia. But also, he explained that the reason he didn't leave the city is because he said at one point the city itself where we live now was forest. We live in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania translates from the word words Penn's Woods. So now we're in the city. If you go to a place where it's rural and you can't connect with people, your message you can't get out to people as much. So that's why he stayed in the city.
yeah, yeah, that's where the people are.
That's where the people are.
Are you hearing anything from anybody around there about prisoner releases? Is there anything going on with prisoner releases? Do you think? Are you hearing from any of the politicians talking about like releasing Mumia due to the COVID-19 virus sweeping the prisons?
So the district attorney of the city, Larry Krasner, he made a declaration to release all nonviolent offenders. He made a declaration to release all prisoners that were waiting for decisions from judges and arraignment situations and county jails. He wanted to do all of that. So he's not talking about releasing Mumia, but he's talking about releasing all nonviolent offenders.
Mm-hmm. And so then anybody else, just yeah, tough luck if they're not nonviolent offenders. Or I mean, and then are they actually being released? I mean, or are they just talking about it? Any idea?
They're just talking about it right now. I haven't heard that anyone was actually released yet.
Yeah. And you got uh, any recordings? You working on any music videos or anything these days?
I started working on a song that I wrote for my mom. It's called "Fly."
Mm-hmm.
And when my mom came home from prison, she told me, she said, I'm now home. She said, you don't have to put your life on hold anymore. I want you to fly like an eagle. I want you to do what you want to do what you feel you need to do. I want you to fly. So I wrote a song called "Fly," and it's really inspired by that interaction when she came home.
It's a gorgeous song.
It won't be released for a while. I'm hoping to release it sometime around the time that the move documentary comes out. There's a documentary being released on some platform that I'm not sure when it's going to be released now because of the pandemic. It was supposed to be released in
Mm-hmm.
October, but
Mm.
things got all backed up, so it's going to be pushed back a few months, I think.
Yep,
So
that's one of those ironies I keep on thinking about when I'm thinking about talking to you. Is your parents just got out of prison not long ago. You're all ready to your kids are all adults now, and you're all ready to start touring, and then the pandemic hits, and everybody's sitting around at
yeah,
home. That is really quite the timing for your particular professional career trajectory, such as it is. Yeah.
yeah, it's disappointing. It's
Yeah.
disappointing, but it's all good though. I get the chance to spend some more time with my kids and spend some time with my family, and it'll be over as soon enough.
And you'd made the decision consciously when you were very young. I mean, I first actually I remember now. I first heard you perform when I believe it was 1990. Uh, Nine or something. I think you were like 18 or something. It was a demo for in Philadelphia for Mumia, and you were on the back of a moving flatbed truck or something like that, if I recall, and performing
That's
from
right.
there. That yeah, does that
Yeah,
ring a bell? Yeah. So
yeah,
that's when I
yeah.
first
We
heard
used to
you,
rent.
and it was yeah. But then you were doing a lot of performing around that time, and then you took basically like um, 25 years off or so.
Yeah, something like that. I did. I did a lot of performances with a lot of different organizations and people all around the country and outside of the country. And then, yep, I took about 25 years off to raise a family and all that. All that comes with it. Get a job that actually paid money because starving artists and a starving artist with a wife and 4 kids.
Yeah, but
I
that's
can I can starve a little bit, but I couldn't let my kids be
that's not
hungry.
entirely the situation, though, is it? I mean, you really had a good possible chance to not be a starving artist by any means, to be a very
I did.
non-starving artist, but you chose not to
I
do that.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I did tell you that too, didn't I? So
Well,
there
I
was
mean,
another
even
situation.
without you telling me that, you opened for Rage Against the Machine, Michael Franti, and a heck of a lot of artists that when you're opening for artists like that, you're on a certain track. You're not on the track to be starving generally at that point. Yeah.
Right, right. What happened? Yeah, that life wasn't really a comfortable life for me. It was more than just the the work and the money. It was like at that time with that young age, I guess the environment wasn't good for me. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was another part of it.
And being home and raising kids and growing organic vegetables was a good move.
It was an easier way to stay grounded and focused and not get into trouble. That's what it
Yeah.
was. Yeah,
And
for
also
sure.
maybe what about in terms of being focused and or sort of grounded in a certain community? What about that? Was that also a bit of a question for you in terms of like, I mean, I talk to a lot of other artists who grapple with that. Like they want to be rooted in a particular community in a particular town or city or something, and yet they're also kind of called to be everywhere at the same time.
Well, yeah, like when you're a performer and you're doing your music and you're doing like the political type of music, and you get called to do shows for certain people, Rage Against the Machine isn't in town all the time for me to do shows with. And even if they were, I wouldn't be picked to do shows with them all the time. I mean, I was being called to do shows at strange places, and to pay the bills, yeah, I could do it, but it's not something that I really necessarily politically aligned with. So it was a little bit more difficult. Now I'm much more stable mentally, financially, and so it makes it a little easier to just go ahead and jump on. But back then, it wasn't exactly the same.
And the stream of consciousness here, but financially, if people want to support the work you're doing with the seeds of wisdom, is that going to go? Can they go to mikeafrica.com? They can find out about that. Is that one place
They can
they can go?
they can go to MikeAfricaJr.com.
Junior, yeah.
Mike
What's on the screen there?
MikeAfricaJr.com.
Uh huh.
Yep. And they can see all the different things that I'm doing. But then my charity, they can go to Seed of Wisdom, www.seedofwisdom.org,
Mm-hmm. Seed
and they can find
singular.
out all about singular. Yes,
Uh huh.
singular.
Great.
Yeah.
And have you ever been hired to do a gig on a Facebook page?
Uh, Not yet,
Uh huh.
but I was offered something. I didn't do it
Yeah.
because it clashed with another. Like right now, within the next like 3 minutes, I got another Zoom call.
Yeah.
So they tried to get me to do this thing, but I couldn't do it because I had this other call that I had to do at the same time, and they're trying to reschedule it. But I'm interested in doing that. I'd like to see how that goes, how that works.
Yeah, like doing your whole, you could do potentially your whole talk or do a concert on online like that for a Facebook page. Like I've, it's been interesting for me doing, I've done three of them and you kind of like, you're playing for the audience that you're actually playing for, you know, because they're the ones who are
Yeah.
watching. But anyway, Mike Africa Jr., thank you so much for talking to me. I'll let you get get onto your Zoom call with the city councilor, and I hope we can free Mumia before the virus comes to the prison there. And thanks so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Anytime, Dave. Pleasure, man. Thank you.
Thank you. See you again. And that was Mike Africa Jr. in Philadelphia. And thank you all out there, wherever you are on the internet, for joining me for another discussion with David. You'll find this archived along with all my other discussions on the Discussions with David playlist on my YouTube channel and in podcast form if you search for This Week with David Rovics in any podcasting platform, or just go to davidrovics.com. Tomorrow, I'll be talking with Ramsey Kanan, founder of PM Press and AK Press before that, back at the usual time at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. On Thursday, I'll be doing a children's concert at the same time and place. And thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you again soon here in the Matrix and eventually back out on the streets. And if you want to support my broadcasting and musical efforts in these days of quarantine and no touring, and 44% of the population wondering where they're going to get their next meal from, you can go to davidrovics.com/subscribe. And if you want to sign up to the open mic, which we are broadcasting on the Popular Resistance Facebook page and various other platforms, you can sign up at davidrovics.com/POMM, Pandemic Open Mic Mondays. And I hope to see you again soon online and elsewhere, hopefully. And keep on keeping on. Don't pay the rent. And solidarity will get us through.